Hello, I'm Maria, the founder of 4 Seeds and Foraging, which is a Minneapolis-based business that teaches you to safely and sustainably identify and harvest wild edibles. And today I am in my lovely apartment, and yeah, ignore the wilty plant behind me here. It's motherwort. I'm gonna dry it and use it for tea and stuff. I was trying to revive it in some water, but it's not really working. Anyway, I'm setting out in my apartment today because what I wanted to do is a wild food roundup. So basically, I'm gonna just step out of my apartment and starting right here in the middle of the city, show you all of the different wild edibles and wild medicines that I can find. So this video is more for inspirational purposes, to get you out there, to show you just how many wild edibles grow in our neighborhoods, even in urban areas like where I live. I'm not gonna, go into detail about each plant that I find. I don't want this video to be like an hour long, so I'm gonna be as brief as possible, but I'll have, if you look at the notes for this video, I'll have some links there to help you with identification and harvesting and eating of wild plants. But for today, we're just gonna step outside and see how many wild edible plants we can find. So let's do it. Okay, so I'm just stepping out of my apartment. Very clean windows here, as you can see. And right away, outside my apartment here, we have daylilies. So some people might not consider daylilies a wild edible because it's a domesticated plant, but it does actually grow in the wild quite a bit. It escapes cultivation and you will find it like in trails and open areas and prairies and meadows and that kind of thing. So I'm counting it as a wild plant. The flowers are edible, the flower buds are edible, the shoots, so the greenery, the stuff, right, when it first comes up in the spring and it's small, is edible. If you dig up the roots, they have these like small kind of peanut-sized tubers that grow, and those tubers are edible and they're crunchy and starchy. And if we keep looking around here, we have violet. So the violet leaves are edible. They're a lot better in the spring. The violet flowers are edible too. You've maybe seen them used on like cakes and pastries and stuff as decoration. They're often candied. So here's a better example of plantain. So the leaves are much better in the spring if you want to eat them. They are also great for bug bites, rashes, skin irritations, that kind of thing. And here we have the plantain flower stalk. Right now it's going to seed. So the flower buds are edible, and then the seeds are edible as well. Plantain is related to psyllium. So the seed husks of plantain are really rich in fiber and can be used like psyllium. So if you don't know what psyllium is, it's the main ingredient in Metamucil. It's a fiber supplement and a bulk forming laxative. So plantain, good thing to know if you need to poop. Here we have tiny little black nightshade. Black nightshade you can tell apart from the other nightshade because it has white petals and a yellow center. And you can see it looks a lot like a little tiny tomato flower is because it's related to tomato. Basically, it's a little tiny, it's like a star-like flower, a little 5-petaled flower with a little yellow center. And the berries of these, here's some tiny little berries. When they're completely ripe, they'll be a dark, dark purple, almost black. And you don't want to eat them when they're underripe because they contain dangerous alkaloids. But they're super, super tasty when they're fully ripe. Here we have lamb's quarters. This one is like very tiny and weird looking, but this is a lamb's quarters. And here we have more of them. This one with the red on it is lamb's quarters as well. So it's like a spinach-like plant, you know, eat the greens. Also related to quinoa, so if you want to go through the process of separating out the seeds, you can do that and eat it like you would quinoa. Okay, this here is a little wood sorrel. This one's a little anemic looking, but it has these clover-like leaves, but the leaves are heart-shaped, whereas the leaves of clover are oval-shaped. And then these little 5-petaled yellow flowers. And then the seed heads are like tiny little banana-like things. And these have a really good flavor. They taste like sour and lemony. And I can't remember if I said dandelion yet, but here's dandelion. The leaves are really good in the spring. You can also eat the flowers, the flower buds, the flower petals. You can eat the root, make a tea out of the root. Lots of uses for that one. And then we also have these silver maples, which, yes, they are a wild edible because you can drink the sap and make syrup from it. And then another very common plant, all over the ground ivy. You've probably seen it, you probably know it. It's these little heart-shaped leaves. They're in the mint family. And you can use it like a spice, like just use it kind of in small amounts, or make a tea out of it. It's got some medicinal properties, as many things in the mint family do. And then here is more yellow wood sorrel. So here's just a better picture of it, since the other stuff looked kind of anemic and sad. Okay. And then growing here by this little retaining wall is pellitory. So this one has alternate leaves. And the flowers come out from where the leaf stem meets the main stem. And this one, the above ground portions are edible, so the leaves and the stem. It tastes quite a bit like cucumber. Oh, and here we have common milkweed. So lots of edible parts to this one. The shoots when they come up in the spring. The flower buds, the flowers, the pods when they first come out, and they're like really tiny. They're good. When they're like a half inch or less long, you can pickle them, eat them like that. When they get a little bit bigger, like around an inch and a half, you can crack them open, and the inside is like silky and juicy, kind of like corn silk. It won't get that like fibery quality until they're older and tough and mature. So if you get the pods young, they're really good. Well, here's black medic, which is not something I typically eat, but it is edible. It's in the clover family. It has edible seeds. The greens are edible as well. Okay, here's the seeds. They're these like little tiny black seeds. And then here we have amaranth, which you can tell by these spiky seed heads. And then it has these big diamond-shaped leaves. And the leaves are edible. You can eat them as a spring green or as a cooked herb. The seeds are edible. You might have seen them in like health food stores or as a part of porridge or in bread. So same amaranth, just a different variety. So that's 12, I think, 13. Geez, where am I? Oh, and then here's the black nightshade again. This is kind of a better example because it's bigger and you can see the flowers better. And here's the leaves. The leaves often get bug eaten. And then down here we have some kind of a mustard, like a, what is it? I'm trying to tell by the leaves. Well, it's in the mustard family. It's some kind of a like wild mustard / wild pepper. So the seeds of these are edible. The flower heads are edible. Greens, edible as well. Just gonna taste the seed and see what it's like. It's probably kind of peppery. mustardy, maybe a bit like wasabi. Yep, it is. So things in the mustard family always have 4-petaled flowers. But these flowers are really tiny, so they're hard to see anyway. But they have these 5-petal flowers, and they grow in this form where the seeds form and the flowers keep going up the stem, and eventually this whole entire thing will just be seeds. So, like it is here, or here. And I think there's some other things I'm missing on identifying things in the mustard family, but this form here is always really obvious. Talk about this small tree shrub here. This is Juneberry, so we're out of Juneberry season right now, so no Juneberries growing on it. But it is another wild edible. So I think this is 15 now and barely off my apartment. And then growing right next to the Juneberry is hawthorn, which the fruits will be in season in a couple months or so, or not a couple months, what am I saying? Probably like a month. And they look very similar to crabapple, but they're not. It's got this like flaky bark, very dense growth, and if you find them in the wild, they have thorns on them, but they're often bred to not have thorns when they're grown in the city. Okay, so I'm by this park here. Wanted to get away from the busy road, so this is just a few blocks from my house, and right in front of us here we have a hackberry tree, so this big guy. And the hackberries will be ripe pretty soon here. It's usually late August, early September that they're ripen. And they're kind of a figgy sweet berry, and they turn like a brownish purplish when they're ripe. And you actually want to eat the seed and the berry all together, so just crunch through the seed. Assuming that you don't have delicate dental work or anything. And then across the street here, it's pretty shadowy, but this is a basswood or a linden tree, so those blossoms are really popular medicinally for like calming purposes, and I forget what they all do. I think like fever reducer, pain reducer. In this park here we have a ton of oak trees, so acorns are edible. They do require some processing. You don't just want to eat them right off the tree. Here's a closer view of the hackberry bark, since it's very distinctive. So with the acorns, you need to process them in water to leach out the tannins before you eat them, and then roast them, grind them, make bread, make porridge. Whatever you want to do. Here's a closer view of the basswood. You can see those big heart-shaped leaves, and that's where the flowers used to be, so that's the seeds now, those little ball-shaped things. Sorry, it's so windy out here. But very commonly planted in this city. Here's another oak tree. Oh, here's a black walnut. So this one's not fully ripe yet. So there it is. They will get a little bit bigger, but like I said, it's smaller than a tennis ball, bigger than a golf ball, and it's like still very, very hard. And yeah, they should be more of a like yellowy color when they're falling. Alright, so that's the black walnut. And then next to the black walnut here we have ginkgo, which ginkgo is also edible. And if you don't know what a ginkgo leaf looks like, you probably should, because they're like a really weird old plant. They're like dinosaur era plant. So they have those little fan-shaped leaves. I'm trying to find one on the ground. Oh, here's like a piece of one that got chewed up by a mower. So that tree right there, right behind the park bench, is also a ginkgo. But I mean, you can kind of see the leaves on there, I guess. So it's the nuts of the ginkgo that you want to eat, and they're surrounded by this like super stinky flesh that you need to remove, and then you have to cook the nuts. Here's a slightly bigger black walnut. Maybe doing a video like this was a bad idea for someone who's as distractible as me. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, ginkgo. So yeah, you have to wash off the like stinky pulpy part and then cook the nut. And from what I read, you're not supposed to eat a lot of the nuts. I don't have actually any experience eating them. I want to start doing that this year. Because yeah, there's some parks that have like a crap ton of them, and they're now legal to harvest in Minneapolis parks. And here is a crab apple. So crab apples look kind of similar to hawthorn, but you can see this one is obviously much bigger than the hawthorn we looked at earlier. Also the growth form is more open, and crab apples really vary in size. These ones on here, if you can see them, are quite small, or maybe, I don't know, half inch long, but you can find them where they're like an inch or even bigger at times, which the bigger the better. Pine tree, that guy, edible. I'm not going to focus too much on the evergreens, but all the evergreens, or most of the evergreens, are edible. Yeah, you can like make a tea out of the needles. They're really high in vitamin C. They're great for wintertime when you're more susceptible to colds and coughs and that kind of thing, just getting ill in general. There's another hackberry right there, and there's a spruce, so another evergreen, which is edible. Again, you don't want to just like eat the needles, at least not at this stage, but you can make a tea, infuse vinegar, infuse syrup. In the springtime, you'll see the tips growing on here. So the new growth of the spruce right now is this kind of lighter colored spruce here, but in the spring they'll come up in these like little nugget looking things, and those are like really pliable and soft and fruity, and if you get them early enough you can just eat those because they're soft enough, but they're usually best. I like them like infused in things as well, so like an infused syrup of spruce is super good, of the spruce tips specifically. Okay, so I found this hackberry twig on the ground, so I thought I'd show you all. Here's the hackberry leaf. It's heart-shaped, got this uneven base. You often see these galls on them. It's Gall. It's created by bugs. And then here are the berries. So you see they're like a brownish, kind of purplish color, and they're not quite fully ripe yet, but they're getting there. And then here we have more black walnuts. So those three nearest trees are black walnuts. And you can kind of see the leaves on there. They're these big old compound leaves. And then here's a little white cedar, which I said I wasn't going to focus too much on the evergreens, and I'm not. But again, you can make a tea out of the leaves, use it as an infusion in syrup or vinegar, and yeah, it's really commonly used for coughs and colds and flu prevention, wintertime sicknesses. So here's a sad little mowed down burdock. Probably find a bigger one somewhere, but this is a plant that gets really huge. The leaves will get like, 3 feet long. Plant, when it's flowering, will get 6-7 feet tall. And there's many edible parts of this. The root is probably the most popular. It's cultivated in Japan, known as Gobo. And then the leaf stems are edible. You might get those earlier in the year. And then the flower stem, when that first comes up, maybe like June-ish, You don't want it when it's fully grown, but as it's still growing, that's really tasty. And it has the seed heads that are all sticky. Those aren't edible, or at least not that I know of. But it's like Velcro. It's actually what the guy who invented Velcro used this as inspiration. So yeah, when you're out in the woods and you get those like birds stuck on your clothes, the big round ones, and like they're on your dog's fur and stuff, that's from this plant, Burdock. So here is planted some Aronia, which is actually a native wild plant, also known as chokeberry. It has these finely serrated oval leaves. The berries are like almost black when ripe, like a dark purple. And then they have these 5-pointed stars at the bottom. That's the remnant of the sepal. And yeah, they are edible and really delicious. You do want to process them first by making juice, which you can just do it by mashing them up with some water and then straining out the pulp through thin material like a jelly bag or muslin or cheesecloth or something like that. And yeah, because if you eat them straight off the tree, they are going to be astringent, kind of bitter, but that's actually all in the pulp. So if you juice it, it tastes amazing. Okay, so down here we have a little plant called gallant Soga or gallant soldier, and it has these lobed petals and a yellow center in the flower. The camera isn't really focusing well here, but it doesn't like the bright white. But yeah, hope you get an idea of that. It's a fuzzy plant. You can eat the leaves of this. And there's 2 different species that grow in the area. I forget which is which now, but they look very similar. So, and up here, oh, actually here's a bigger gallant Soga, also known as gallant soldier, which maybe gives you a better idea of what it looks like. Focus. Alright. And then over here we have a little community garden, which they're often treasure troves of weeds and various wild edibles. So let's take a quick look here. Yeah, so down here in the grass, or not this isn't grass, this is mulch. This is curly dock or yellow dock. The root is used medicinally as a laxative and digestive bitter. The greens you can just eat. They're quite a bit like spinach. You can eat them raw if they're young and tender and fresh enough. Otherwise you want to cook them. And they are often kind of bitter. So you want to find them growing in a good location and get them as young as possible. There's various species of dock. This one, like I said, is your yellow or curly dock. You often will find them where the edges are way more curly than this, which is how they get the name curly dock, but sometimes there's just some variation between the plants, so this one's not particularly curly. And if I see an older one growing, I'll show you, because the seeds of them are also edible and they're out this time of year. Okay, so here's a thistle. These are edible. Not sure what species this is. Yeah, it's hard to tell before it flowers, at least for me. So, yeah, I'm not sure what species this is, but thistles, the roots are edible, the leaves are edible, the leaf stem is edible. Obviously you don't want to just put a bunch of thorns in your mouth, so you have to be careful of that, remove the thorns beforehand, but they are edible, and some of them are less thorny than others. Well, I haven't mentioned the clovers yet. So here's white clover. Clovers aren't really something I eat much. And here's a side-by-side comparison of clover leaves versus the wood sorrel leaves. The wood sorrel is heart-shaped. Clover has these oval-shaped leaves. Here's the flower. I do like red clover. I like making a tea out of the blossoms, or you can make a jelly out of it too, but I don't actually see any red clover on here. This here's catnip. So, member of the mint family, got square stem, opposite leaves. It's gonna have like a purple or pinkish flower, or whitish in some cases, and a kind of musty mint-like odor, but it's good for your stomach, good for calming the nerves, good for pain relief, and it's just tasty if you just want a tasty tea. And then planted here in front of this garden we have cup plant. So this is a really distinctive plant. It's called cup plant because the leaves are fused in the middle, and there's this area here where it collects water. It has this really strong square stem with ridges on it, and it's got this like sunflower like flower, and it gets really big, as you can tell. So yeah, the leaves of these are edible when young. Here's a bunch of hostas which are actually edible as well. I've never personally eaten them, but I've read about it. And then comfrey. So hostas, comfrey are, of course, planted plants, but you do find them occasionally in the wild where they've escaped cultivation. Oh, back there is a burdock peeking out. You can see the little flower heads that are going to seed. Here's like some kind of garlic or onion, which I'm not sure what species this is, but there are wild garlics and wild onions. This is a polygonum. Might be, I'm not sure what species it is, but it is a polygonum. They're edible. They have these weird little, like, clumpy flowers and narrow lance-like leaves, and then there's these sheaves where the leaf stem meets the main stem. I hope that's in focus. Camera's annoying. Yeah, so the leaves of these are edible. And here's tansy. This looks like a little different, like maybe it's a cultivated variety, but there are tansies that grow in the wild that you use medicinally, or you use the leaves sparingly as an herb. Oh, and then here's the curly dock that I was talking about, the seeds of the curly dock. So these are related to buckwheat, so they have a similar look to them. It's a three-sided seed. And if you look further down, here's the leaves, which again are not super curly on this particular plant. And then here is bellflower, which is, I believe, an invasive plant. That's edible. And here's Joe Pieweed, which is planted here, but it's native. And this is used medicinally. Is cheeses, or mallow, it's also called. It has this kind of vaguely maple-shaped crinkly leaf, and then these little, I think they're 5-petaled flowers. Here's another one, and this one's going to seed. And they're called cheeses because the seed pods kind of look like a little cheese wheel. So if I just pop this out, let's see, it's almost like a little cheese wheel. And so the greens of these are edible. These guys, the wheels, are edible too. And they're kind of mucilaginous. They can be used kind of like okra. It's like a thickener. And I've also seen recipes where these are boiled down and used for
like making wild marshmallows and wild meringues, because these are related to marshmallow, and that was the, I guess, the original source of marshmallows. So it makes kind of a confection that's a bit marshmallow-like. Here's more mallow growing on the sidewalk cracks. This flower is a little more visible. Cute. Here's the pretty daylily flower. This one has more than 6 petals. Sometimes they're just weird like that. There's different cultivars of them. But now you get a sense of what they look like. And they also frequently dry right on the stem like this. You can just actually pick these and throw them right in soup. So they're pretty cool like that. And then here's a look at the flower bud, which is also edible. You can eat it raw or cook it or pickle it. There's a flower bud that's a little bit bigger. And then here's a more typical flowers. This one actually does have 6 petals. It's technically 3 petals and 3 sepals, but whatever, 6 petals. So here we have a juniper shrub. This is technically a red cedar, but juniper is the Latin name, so I call it juniper. And here we have the little berries, which are actually modified cones. And the berries are used in flavoring gin. These aren't ripe yet. They're going to be like a dark blue when they're ripe, but you can use them as a seasoning. You can use them to infuse alcohol. They're also medicinal, and yeah, they're pretty tasty. A little bit goes a long way though. They're pretty powerful, pack a punch. And juniper is often used in landscaping, so you'll often see it growing in front of buildings like this here. All right, here's some little purslane growing, just right next to the sidewalk here. But yeah, this guy is very healthy, full of omega-3s, high in vitamins and minerals. It's got these spatula-shaped leaves, very succulent and fleshy, and also have a mucilaginous quality, a bit like okra. So there's more of it. And that's not it. Here's a tiny little one. Yeah, I recommend trying it if you haven't. Just make sure you're not eating spurge. So since I just mentioned spurge, I want to point this out. This here is a spotted spurge, and you'll see it lacks the succulence that purslane has. And a big telltale sign that this is a spurge is that when you break the stem or the leaves, this white latex comes out. So this is a poisonous one, so do not eat this one. Well, that concludes our wild food roundup. I hope you found it inspiring. I lost track somewhere along the way, but I think we found around 30 wild plants, and that's just growing a few blocks from my apartment here. You know, there's so much more to be found in the city. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it inspires you to go out and look for wild edibles as well. If you liked my video, please do all the YouTube stuff, you know, hit the like button, subscribe. You can also join me on Patreon. It helps me keep producing these videos for free. It's only $1 a month, or you can go up to $15 a month if you want. But any level of support is greatly appreciated. And yeah, thanks again for watching, and have a good one. Happy foraging.